The sky over Houston was weighed down by thick gray clouds, the kind that made the whole city feel heavier. Rain was coming, just like the forecast had warned. I stared out of my office window, my mind drifting back to the house I grew up in, the memories I had long pushed aside. "Eleanor, can you check this manuscript today?" Lisa's voice pulled me back to reality. I turned to see her standing near my desk, holding a thick manuscript. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. Reviewing manuscripts was the best part of my job at Westwood Publishing, helping new writers polish their work, guiding their stories to life. It was something that gave me a sense of purpose. As I reached for the document, my phone vibrated. My stomach tightened when I saw the name on the screen: Melanie, my younger sister, the one who had always been at the center of everything. I hesitated before answering. Conversations with Melanie were never relaxing. "Hey, Mel," I said, keeping my voice even. "Eleanor, don't tell me you forgot about dinner this weekend," she said, her tone light but laced with expectation. I sighed, rubbing my temple. "I didn't forget." "Good," she replied. "Mom and Dad are expecting us, and don't be late this time." That was Melanie, always speaking as if she were relaying royal decrees rather than simple requests. "I'll be there," I said before ending the call. I glanced at the framed family photo on my desk. My parents, Mark and Cynthia Moore, stood with warm smiles, their arms wrapped around Melanie. And then there was me on the edge of the frame, smiling but distant. That was the story of our family. Melanie had always been the star, the one who got standing ovations and special treatment. When she won an award, there were grand celebrations. When I achieved something, it was met with a casual "good job." It wasn't resentment I felt, not completely. More like an ache, a quiet loneliness I had carried for years. Shaking my head, I tried to focus on the manuscript in front of me. But no matter how hard I tried, my thoughts kept circling back to the familiar feeling of being an afterthought. Then, the next afternoon, everything changed. The ringing phone on my desk broke my concentration. An unknown number flashed across the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Hello? Miss Moore?" A deep voice said. "Yes? This is Officer Reynolds with the Houston Police Department. I'm calling about your parents, Mark and Cynthia Moore." My grip on the phone tightened. What about them? There was an accident. Heavy rain last night. Their car lost control on the highway and collided with an oncoming truck. "I'm very sorry, but they didn't survive." The words struck like a physical blow. My breath caught in my throat. The office around me blurred, fading into nothing but a distant hum. "No," I whispered, my voice barely there. "I'm very sorry for your loss, Miss Moore," the officer said gently. I barely remembered the rest of the conversation. Words like arrangements and annexed of kin floated around me, but I couldn't process them. My hands felt ice cold. My heart pounded in my ears. When the call ended, I just sat there staring at my phone. A minute passed. Then another. Lisa walked by, then stopped when she saw my face. "Eleanor, are you okay?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I swallowed hard. My parents, they're gone. The words didn't feel real. They sounded like something from a tragic novel, not my life. I grabbed my bag and left the office in a daze. The ride home was a blur of city lights and rain-streaked windows. That night, I sat in my darkened apartment, my phone screen glowing in the dim room. A text from Melanie appeared. "Melanie, we need to talk about the estate. Call me when you're ready." Even now, with our parents barely gone, she was thinking about the inheritance. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I had no idea just how much that inheritance would change everything. The funeral was a blur, a mix of handshakes, hollow condolences, and whispered conversations that barely registered. I stood next to Melanie, accepting sympathies from people who had always adored our parents. Some gave Melanie long, comforting hugs. Others simply nodded at me before moving on. It wasn't new. I had always been the shadow in our family, the one who was there but never quite at the center. Melanie, of course, took the role of the grieving daughter flawlessly. Her mascara was perfectly smudged, her voice breaking at just the right moments. I wasn't saying she didn't feel the loss, but I knew her too well. This wasn't just about grief. It was about image. She had always been good at making people see her the way she wanted to be seen. After the funeral, the house felt emptier than I expected. I walked through the rooms, running my fingers over furniture that had once felt warm and familiar. Now, it was just a collection of things left behind. The house smelled the same lavender and old wood, but it no longer felt like home. Melanie was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine when I walked in. "The lawyer called," she said, swirling the glass like she was at some high-end tasting event. "The will's being read tomorrow." I nodded, though my stomach clenched at the thought. I had no idea what to expect. My parents weren't wealthy, but they had assets, this house, their cars, whatever was in their accounts. I didn't care much about the money. What I did care about was whether I was even considered. Because if there was one thing I had learned over the years, it was that I was never the priority. The next morning, we sat in a sleek conference room at a law firm downtown. The scent of polished wood and strong coffee filled the space. Across the table sat James Whitmore, our parents' longtime attorney. He was an older man, his graying hair combed neatly, his suit crisp. He greeted us with a somber nod before opening a thick folder. "I know this is a difficult time," he said, "but your parents were very clear in their wishes, and it's important we go through everything properly." Melanie leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed. She had that air of expectation about her, the certainty that whatever was coming would favor her. Whitmore adjusted his glasses and began. "First, regarding real estate, the Moore family home, along with all furnishings, is bequeathed to Melanie Ann Moore." Melanie smiled. Not a small, polite smile, a full, victorious one. Like she had just won something. I stayed silent, my hands clasped in my lap. Whitmore continued, "The 2022 Lexus and 2023 Audi, both in your parents' names, are also bequeathed to Melanie Ann Moore." Another nod from Melanie. Another confirmation that she had, once again, been the favored one. I braced myself for whatever small acknowledgement I might receive. Maybe some money. A sentimental item. Something to show they hadn't completely overlooked me. But Whitmore wasn't done. He cleared his throat before saying, "As for all financial assets, including savings, investments, and personal valuables, they are also left entirely to Melanie Ann Moore." The room felt like it tilted. My grip tightened on my knees. Melanie didn't even look at me. Whitmore hesitated before continuing. "To Eleanor Rose Moore, your parents have left the Moore family barn and the surrounding half-acre of land." I blinked. "The barn?" Melanie let out a short laugh. "Oh, that's just perfect." I ignored her, staring at Whitmore. "That's it?" His lips pressed together. "Your father left a note regarding the barn. He asked that you read it personally." He slid a sealed envelope across the table. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up. I didn't open it. Not yet. Melanie, on the other hand, was all smiles. "Well, that settles it." I think our parents knew exactly what they were doing. I looked at her then, really looked at her. The ease in her posture, the smugness in her expression. She had already decided that this was how it was supposed to be, that this was just another example of how she had won, and I had lost. I stood, clutching the envelope in my hand. "We're done here." Melanie raised an eyebrow. "You're not going to fight this?" I forced a tight smile. "No, Mel. Enjoy your house. Enjoy your cars." I turned for the door. "I'll enjoy my barn." That evening, I drove out to the property. It had been years since I had been there. The barn sat on the far edge of the land, hidden behind old oak trees. It had always been a quiet, forgotten place. As kids, we weren't allowed to play inside. My father had always said it was dangerous, that it was just an old storage space. The wood was weathered, the paint peeling. I pushed open the heavy doors, and dust swirled in the air. The scent of aged wood and metal filled my lungs. Inside, it was cluttered with old furniture, rusted tools, and boxes stacked haphazardly. I sighed. This was what my parents thought I deserved? A forgotten storage unit? Then I remembered the letter. I tore open the envelope, unfolding the crisp paper inside. My father's handwriting was neat and familiar. "Eleanor, if you're reading this, it means you finally come to the barn. Good. That means you're ready. I know this seems unfair, but trust me, there's more here than you think. Look carefully. This is where our true legacy lies. Love, Dad." I read the words 3 times, trying to make sense of them. Then I looked around the barn again, really looked. Something about the way the floorboard sat seemed off. I stepped closer, brushing away a layer of dust. That's when I saw a metal plate embedded into the floor, a handle. Heart pounding, I crouched down and pulled. The trapdoor creaked open, revealing a staircase leading into darkness. A hidden basement. I grabbed my phone, turning on the flashlight. My breath was shallow as I took the first step down. The air was cooler here, the space impossibly vast beneath the barn. Shelves lined the walls, filled with neatly organized documents, books, and photos. Then I saw it. A desk, and on it, a second envelope. This one had my name written in my mother's handwriting. I swallowed hard. Whatever this was, whatever secret my parents had kept hidden, it was meant for me. And suddenly I realized maybe I hadn't been forgotten after all. The air in the basement was thick, carrying the scent of old paper and time. My footsteps echoed as I moved deeper into the space, my phone's flashlight sweeping across the room. It wasn't just some dusty storage area. This place had been carefully maintained. Shelves filled with documents and neatly stacked boxes lined the walls. A large wooden desk sat in the center, its surface bare except for one thing, a second envelope. My name scrawled across it in my mother's handwriting. I hesitated before picking it up. My fingers traced the ink, as if that could bring her back for just a moment longer. Finally, I took a deep breath and opened it. Eleanor, if you found this, it means you're exactly where you need to be. There are things we never told you, things we should have. This is your family's true legacy, and it belongs to you. Start with the cabinet on the far left. Look at what's inside and you'll understand. With love, Mom. I exhaled slowly, my pulse quickening. My mother had always been quiet, reserved. She wasn't the type to leave behind cryptic messages. If she had written this, it meant something important. I turned toward the cabinet she had mentioned. It was tall, made of dark wood, with brass handles that were cold beneath my fingertips. The door creaked as I pulled it open. Inside, rows of labeled files stretched from top to bottom. I ran my fingers along the spines, scanning the names. My breath caught when I saw one that read, Eleanor's Records. I pulled it out, setting it on the desk. The folder was thick, filled with papers. The first few pages were report cards from my childhood, medical records, and legal documents. But as I flipped further, I found something that made my stomach drop. Handwritten notes. My father's handwriting. Eleanor took care of the house when Cynthia was sick, kept everything running, never complained. When Melanie struggled in school, Eleanor tutored her every night for months. No one asked her to. She has always been the strongest, the most reliable, but we've never told her that. I swallowed hard, my vision blurring. I turned the page. She is the backbone of this family. She has carried us more than she knows. Tears burned at the edges of my eyes. My whole life, I had felt like the afterthought, like I was always standing in Melanie's shadow. And yet, here in this hidden basement, in my father's private words, was proof that they had seen me all along. They had known. I wiped my face and turned to the next section. This one was labeled Family History. Inside were old photographs, newspaper clippings, even letters dating back decades. My great-grandparents, my grandparents' generations of our family, all documented here. I picked up a worn black and white photo of a young couple standing in front of the very barn above me. The back was labeled Samuel and Margaret Moore, 1932. This wasn't just a barn. It had been in our family for generations. I scanned the documents, piecing together a story I had never been told. The land had once been part of a thriving farm, but over the years, the family had moved on to other things. Yet my father had held on to it. He had preserved this space, not just for storage, but as a vault for our family's history. But why had he left it to me? I glanced back at the cabinet. There was one more file, thicker than the others. The label sent a chill through me, Melanie Moore. I hesitated before pulling it out. It felt wrong, like I was intruding on something private. But my parents had left this for me. They had wanted me to see it. I flipped it open. Unlike my folder, Melanie's was filled with different kinds of documents, medical records, psychological evaluations, notes from doctors. My hands trembled as I read. Diagnosed with severe anxiety and depressive episodes at 14. Struggles with feelings of inadequacy despite external success. Requires constant validation from parental figures to maintain self-worth. I stared at the words, my heart pounding. I had always seen Melanie as the golden child, the one who got everything effortlessly. But now, reading these notes, I realized the truth. She hadn't been pampered because she was better. She had been protected because she was fragile. That's why my parents had given her everything material. The house, the money, the cars. They had built a safety net around her, knowing she needed it to stay afloat. But me? They had given me something else entirely. Not a house, not money. They had given me responsibility, truth, the weight of our family's history. And in doing so, they had told me something they had never said out loud. They had believed in me. I closed the folder, my mind racing. For years, I had carried resentment toward Melanie. I had thought she had everything while I had nothing. But now, I saw it for what it was. She had been given things. I had been given trust. I wasn't sure which of us had gotten the better deal. I stood in the basement for a long time, running my fingers along the old wooden desk, the shelves of carefully preserved history. Then I made a decision. I needed to tell Melanie. She needed to know the truth about our parents, about the choices they had made. Maybe, just maybe, we could stop seeing each other as rivals and start seeing each other for who we really were. I tucked the folders under my arm, turned off the light, and climbed the stairs. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking in her shadow. I was walking toward something real, toward the truth. I barely slept that night. My mind kept circling back to everything I had found in the basement. The truth about my parents, the truth about Melanie. It was like my entire life had been rewritten in a single evening. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I didn't bother calling ahead. If I gave Melanie time to prepare, she'd put up walls, twist the conversation in her favor, or most likely refuse to listen at all. No, this had to happen in person. Her house, our parents' house now, was as pristine as ever when I pulled into the driveway. The lawn was perfectly trimmed, the windows spotless. The place had always felt more like a museum than a home. I rang the doorbell, gripping the files under my arm. A moment later, the door swung open. Melanie stood there, dressed in a fitted blouse and slacks, her makeup flawless. If she was surprised to see me, she didn't show it. "Eleanor," she said coolly, "what a surprise. We need to talk." She sighed, stepping aside. "Fine, come in." I walked into the living room and took a seat on the couch. It felt strange being there without our parents. Their presence still lingered in the perfectly arranged furniture, the framed family portraits, the faint scent of our mother's favorite vanilla candles. Melanie sat across from me, legs crossed, fingers tapping impatiently against her knee. "All right," she said. "What's this about?" I set the folders on the coffee table between us. "I went to the barn yesterday." Her eyes flickered with something curiosity. Maybe, but she didn't respond. "There's a basement," I continued. "A hidden one. Dad and Mom left something for me down there." Now she looked interested. "A basement?" I nodded. "And inside, I found this." I slid her folder toward her. She hesitated before picking it up. The moment her eyes landed on the contents, her entire body tensed. "What is this?" Her voice was quieter now. "It's everything Mom and Dad never told us," I said. "Everything they didn't say out loud." She flipped through the pages, her expression unreadable. But I saw the way her grip tightened, the way her breathing changed. "You knew about this?" she asked, her voice sharp. "I found out last night," I said. "Just like I found my file too." She scoffed, tossing the folder onto the table. "So what? Mom and Dad kept records." "Big deal. It is a big deal, Melanie," the first shot back. "Because for years I thought they favored you just because they loved you more. But that wasn't it." I pointed to the notes. "They weren't giving you more, they were protecting you." She flinched. "Just barely." But I saw it. I leaned forward. "You needed them in a way I never did, and they knew that. That's why they gave you the house, the money, the security. They weren't choosing you over me. They were trying to make sure you didn't fall apart." She shook her head, letting out a bitter laugh. "You think that makes it better? You think reading this fixes everything?" "No," I admitted. "But it explains things." Melanie stood abruptly, pacing the room. "You have no idea what it was like for me, Eleanor. You think I had it easy because they gave me things? You don't know what it's like to wake up every day and feel like you're never good enough, to need constant reassurance just to function." I swallowed hard. And you don't know what it was like for me to feel invisible, to work so hard and still be treated like an afterthought. She turned to face me, something raw in her expression. So what now? You want me to apologize? I sighed. No, Melanie. I want us to stop this. To stop resenting each other for things that were never really about us. She stared at me for a long time. Then, slowly, she sat back down. For the first time in years, Melanie didn't have a quick response. She just looked, lost. I let the silence stretch. I wasn't going to push her. Finally, she let out a breath. You're right, she admitted. So quietly, I almost missed it. I looked at her, surprised. I've always been jealous of you, she said, rubbing her temples. You didn't need them the way I did. You could stand on your own. And I hated that. Because I couldn't. Her honesty hit me harder than I expected. I reached for my own folder, flipping it open. You know what Dad wrote about me? I slid the page across the table. He called me the backbone of this family. Melanie read the words, her lips pressing together. They saw me, Mel, I said. Even when I thought they didn't, just like they saw you. She closed her eyes for a moment, then nodded. I guess we both misunderstood them. Yeah, I said. I guess we did. Another silence fell, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It wasn't filled with unspoken anger or old wounds. It was peaceful. I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in years. I don't know what you want to do with this information, I told her. But I thought you deserved to know. She nodded. Thank you. It was just 2 words, but they carried more weight than I expected. As I turned to leave, she called out, Eleanor? I glanced back. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all this, she admitted, gesturing to the files. But maybe we can figure it out together? A small smile tugged at my lips. Yeah, I'd like that. For the first time in a long time, we weren't just 2 sisters caught in an endless cycle of comparison and resentment. We were 2 people trying to understand each other. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The drive back from Melanie's house felt different than I expected. Lighter, like something heavy had finally loosened its grip on my chest. For years, I had carried resentment toward her. I thought she had everything our parents love, their approval, their undivided attention. But the truth was more complicated. She hadn't been given more love. She had been given protection. And me? I had been given trust. And now, for the first time, we understood that about each other. But understanding wasn't the same as fixing. The past couldn't be undone with a single conversation. We had spent years walking separate paths, seeing each other as rivals instead of sisters. If we wanted to change that, it would take more than words. And I wasn't sure if either of us knew how to take that next step. A week passed. I buried myself in work, trying to catch up on manuscripts and emails that had piled up. But my mind kept drifting back to the barn, to the documents, to the weight of my family's history sitting beneath old wooden beams. And then, one afternoon, Melanie called. I've been thinking, she said hesitantly, about everything, about what Mom and Dad left us. I waited. I want to see the barn, she admitted. Really see it. I hadn't expected that. I'll be there in an hour, I said. When I pulled up to the property, Melanie's car was already parked outside. She was leaning against it, arms crossed, looking at the barn like it was something foreign. You sure about this? I asked as I stepped out. She nodded. I need to understand why they left it to you. I pushed open the barn doors, the scent of aged wood and dust greeting us. Sunlight streamed through cracks in the roof, illuminating the space in golden beams. Melanie stepped inside cautiously. I haven't been in here since we were kids. I know. I led her to the trap door. She hesitated only for a moment before following me down into the basement. When the lights flickered on, she inhaled sharply. She took in the shelves lined with documents, the old photographs, the neat stacks of handwritten letters. I watched her walk through the space, fingers grazing the edges of our family's history. This is... She trailed off, shaking her head. I had no idea. I nodded. Neither did I. She stopped in front of our parents' journals. They really wrote about everything, didn't they? Yeah. Even the things we thought they ignored. She pulled out one of the files labeled with her name. I saw the way her fingers trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages. Then, after a long silence, she whispered, I was never supposed to be the strong one. I leaned against the desk. Neither was I. She let out a shaky laugh, then turned to me. I don't want this place to just sit here, Eleanor. It's too important. I tilted my head. What are you saying? I don't know yet, she admitted, but I think we should do something with it, together. I studied her carefully. The Melanie I knew a month ago wouldn't have said that. She would have ignored this place, sold the land, moved on without looking back. But something had shifted. And maybe I wasn't the only one who had changed. Over the next few weeks, we met at the barn almost daily. At first, it was just to clean, to go through the boxes, to sort through decades of memories left behind. But slowly, an idea began to take root. What if we turn this into something real? Melanie asked one afternoon, wiping dust off an old wooden chair. I raised an eyebrow. Real? A place people can actually use, she explained. Not just a storage space. A bookstore, maybe. A cafe. A writing space. Something that honors what Mom and Dad built, but also creates something new. I blinked at her. You want to turn the barn into a business? She shrugged. Why not? You love books. You work in publishing, and I know business and real estate. Between the two of us, we could actually make this work. I didn't answer right away. The idea scared me. Not because it wasn't good, but because it was. Because it was the kind of thing I never would have imagined us doing together. And maybe that was exactly why we should. I exhaled. All right, I said. Let's do it. For the first time in years, Melanie grinned at me, not the smug, competitive smile I was used to, but something real. And just like that, the barn became something more than an inheritance. It became a future. The months that followed were exhausting. We had to gut the interior, reinforce the walls, install plumbing and electricity, things neither of us had ever dealt with before. But we learned. We fought, of course. Old habits didn't disappear overnight, but we also laughed. We worked late into the evenings, fueled by takeout and coffee, arguing over flooring choices and paint colors. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, we started to feel like sisters again. Not competitors, not strangers, just two people who had spent too many years misunderstanding each other. One night, after a long day of renovations, we sat outside on the grass, looking up at the stars. I still can't believe we're doing this, Melanie said, hugging her knees to her chest. Yeah, I admitted. Me neither. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You were right, you know. About Mom and Dad. About everything. I turned to look at her. So were you. She smiled, small but sincere. I looked back at the barn, at the place that had once felt like an insult, but now felt like a gift. It wasn't just a building anymore. It was proof that we could be more than what we had been, that we could rebuild, not just the barn, but us. Opening day arrived faster than I expected. The old barn, once a forgotten relic of our family's past, had transformed into something entirely new. The exterior had been restored, the wood polished and repainted, the weathered beams reinforced. Large windows let sunlight pour inside, warming the space that now held rows of bookshelves, comfortable reading nooks, and a small cafe in the corner. A wooden sign hung over the entrance, carved with elegant lettering, Moore's Books and Cafe. It felt surreal. Melanie stood beside me near the entrance, adjusting a stack of menus for the cafe. She wore a simple button-down and jeans, a far cry from the polished designer outfits she used to favor. I glanced at her, taking in how much had changed, not just with the barn, but with us. You nervous? She asked, catching my gaze. A little, I admitted. You? She smirked. Not even a little, we've got this. I huffed a small laugh. Still overconfident, I see. Always. The front doors swung open, and the first customers trickled in locals, book lovers, families, even some familiar faces from our parents' old circle of friends. They wandered through the aisles, flipping through pages, sipping coffee, chatting as if this place had always existed. A warmth spread through me. We had done it. As the day went on, I found myself behind the counter, helping customers find books, recommending titles, sharing small moments of connection. It felt natural. At one point, I caught Melanie talking to an older woman near the cafe, nodding thoughtfully as she explained something about real estate and small business investments. Even now, she thrived in that world. But the difference was, she wasn't just talking at people anymore. She was listening, engaging. She had changed, and so had I. Later that evening, when the rush had died down, we retreated to the basement. We hadn't touched much down here, preserving it as a private archive of our family's history, a place just for us. Melanie walked along the bookshelves, trailing her fingers over the old journals and files. You ever think about what Mom and Dad would say if they saw this? I smiled, settling into one of the chairs. I think they'd be proud. She nodded, quiet for a moment. Then she chuckled. Can you believe we actually pulled this off? Not at all. She laughed, shaking her head. Honestly, neither can I. Silence stretched between us, not awkward, not tense, just comfortable. Then she glanced at me, something unreadable in her expression. Thank you, Eleanor. I frowned. For what? For not giving up on me. I swallowed the lump in my throat. We both had a lot to learn. Yeah, she exhaled. But I think we're finally getting it right. We sat there for a while, flipping through old family photographs, sharing childhood stories we had never told each other before. It was strange how many moments we had missed while being too wrapped up in our own perspectives. But that was the thing about stories. They changed depending on who was telling them. And now, for the first time, we were telling ours together. Months passed. The cafe and bookstore flourished, becoming a beloved part of the community. Writers gathered in the reading space to share their work. Families came on weekends to browse the shelves. Even Melanie started leading business workshops for young entrepreneurs, helping others build something meaningful. But the biggest change wasn't the barn. It was us. One evening, we sat on the porch, sipping coffee as the sun dipped below the trees. This feels weird, Melanie admitted, stretching her legs out in front of her. What does? She smirked. Liking each other, I laughed. Yeah, it does. A comfortable silence settled between us. Then she glanced at me, a teasing glint in her eye. So, you think we'll still be talking in a year? I snorted. If we survived renovating this place without killing each other, I think we'll be fine. She raised her cup in a mock toast to improbable miracles. I clinked mine against hers, to finally getting it right. As the last rays of sunlight bathed the barn in gold, I realized something. This wasn't just an inheritance, it was home. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't standing in Melanie's shadow. We were standing side by side, exactly where we were meant to be. Story 2, the kitchen was dark. Olivia Bradley was having trouble managing her home finances. Through the windows of her apartment, she could see the streetlights that illuminated the mid-sized city in Michigan. She was balancing her monthly income and expenses during this peaceful period while her 2 children slept. She worked as a medical office clerk, but her pay was insufficient to support her 2 kids. 9-year-old Leah is full of curiosity, while 12-year-old Ethan is quiet and clever. Both were expanding quickly, which led to rising costs. Olivia let out a long sigh. The youngsters were excited about the impending summer vacation. She wished to offer them a wonderful time together, if just a little adventure. However, there was no money left over for a trip after covering this month's rent, electricity, and groceries. Her parents, Harold and Catherine Rann, owned Robinson Properties, a Michigan real estate firm, and she checked her messages on her cell phone. Following her divorce, they had supported Olivia and her grandkids financially for years. For a number of years, such assistance had been an essential part of her existence. We'll have to cut back on our typical assistance this year, I'm afraid. Harold, her father, had mentioned last week over the phone. The business is having some difficulties. Due to economic volatility, the real estate market is challenging. Dad, I get it. Olivia had answered, trying not to show how disappointed she was. It's all right. We'll find a way. However, discussing summer plans with her kids was hard. She stated politely that we might not be able to go on a major vacation this year. Seeing the happiness leave Ethan and Leah's cheeks was painful. Disneyland is out of our reach, Leah inquired. Her large eyes were filled with tears. This year is challenging, my love, Olivia said. The firm of Grandpa and Grandma is going through a difficult period. Perhaps next year will be better. Surprisingly, the kids understood when they said, we'll do without too if Grandpa and Grandma are having a hard time. They're not guilty. Olivia's heart hurt at acceptance. Melissa, her sister, was in a different predicament. She shared a home with her spouse Brad and their 2 kids, Connor, age 7, and Taylor, age 10. When Olivia visited her parents' house last week, Melissa, who had a significant role in their parents' real estate business, profited immensely from it. The driveway was occupied by Melissa's brand new opulent SUV. "Nice new car," said Olivia. "A bonus for parents? Indeed." Melissa nonchalantly responded that she was trying to close a transaction for the business. Olivia remained silent. Though she never said it, she secretly believed that Melissa was always given preference when her parents supported her. She always placed a high value on maintaining harmony within the family and reminded herself that her parents must be going through a lot. Given that she works for the firm, Melissa naturally receives incentives. But when she got home that evening, Olivia resented the injustice as she gazed out her apartment window into the night. Her kids studied using used school supplies and ate simple meals. Melissa's kids, meanwhile, had the newest technology and engaged in a variety of activities each weekend. Olivia shook her head in an attempt to block out such ideas. She wanted to teach her kids about love and compassion instead of material wealth because she thought jealousy was an ugly emotion. Suppressing her emotions, she put her account book away and got ready for work. The following day, "It's a new day tomorrow. We'll manage somehow," she urged herself. She then checked on her kids and gave them a tender kiss while they slept. Olivia received some depressing news on her cell phone at the end of July. Aunt Eleanor, who lived in Arizona, her sister and her father had all died. She had always sent knitted sweaters for Christmas and had been a good aunt since the kids were little. "I have some depressing news." Olivia gathered Ethan and Leah in the living room. "Great Aunt Eleanor has gone to heaven." The children quietly accepted the sadness. "Are we going to the funeral?" Ethan asked. "Yes, we're planning to." Olivia nodded. "We'll need to fly to Arizona that night." Olivia searched for flight information on her laptop. Looking at the prices she found, though, her budget was limited. She was determined to attend an Eleanor's final farewell. "I found some discount airfare," she told her children. "It's a bit inconvenient, but we can manage it." "Is Arizona hot?" Leah asked with curiosity. "Very hot," Olivia smiled. "But it looks like the hotel has a pool. We might be able to swim a bit after the funeral." The children's faces brightened. They had given up on a family vacation for summer break, but they were happy to experience even a small taste of travel. This way, at least a small adventure for the children, Olivia thought. Though it was a trip for a sad reason, it would still be an opportunity to show the children a new place. On departure day, Olivia and the children left home early in the morning. They took a public bus to the airport, arriving 3 hours early with discount tickets. The check-in order was important. "This way, the economy check-in is over here." Olivia directed her children into a lengthy line. Ethan suddenly tugged on Olivia's arm. "Mom, look, aren't those Grandpa and Grandma?" When Olivia turned in that direction, she noticed her parents at the premium check-in desk. And strangely, Melissa and her family were with them. They all carried fancy travel bags and were definitely dressed for a lengthy holiday. Harold was conversing with the clerk at the counter, and Catherine was pointing things out to her grandkids. "It must be a coincidence," Olivia murmured, masking her bewilderment. "They're probably going to Aunt Eleanor's funeral, too." But internally, concerns were brewing. Why hadn't her parents spoken anything about the funeral? And why did they appear to be arranging for a lavish trip with Melissa's family while the firm was reportedly struggling? When boarding time came, Olivia and her children rushed for the plane with their boarding papers. The back seats in economy class were slated to board last. Upon entering the airplane, Olivia, Ethan, and Leah sought to get through the first-class section via the short aisle. Suddenly, Leah paused. "Mom, look," she whispered in a low but enthusiastic voice. In the luxurious first-class seats sat her parents and sister's family. Harold and Catherine already had champagne glasses, while Melissa and her children were watching movies on iPads. There was a flight attendant explaining premium wine labels to Brad. Olivia had the impression that her feet were fastened to the ground. When she looked at her parents, time seemed to halt. After a brief moment of astonishment, they waved and smiled strangely at Olivia. "What a coincidence, Olivia!" Catherine yelled. Her voice carried stress. "Will you attend the funeral for Eleanor?" Silently, Olivia inquired. Harold stumbled. "Well, we're actually going to Hawaii. It is kind of a business function." Olivia gave a quiet nod. Taking her kids' hands, she started to make her way to the economy seats. Her thoughts were racing. Her parents' lies about the company's difficulties were obvious. Olivia assisted Leah into the window seat, and Ethan took the aisle seat as they arrived at their seats. Olivia herself sat in the center. When it was time for meals, first class was filled with the smells of opulent cuisine. Economy, on the other hand, simply provided beverages and little sandwiches. Leah spoke in a little voice while pulling at her mother's sleeve. "Are we being excluded, Mom?" Olivia felt her heart stabbed by that question. Ethan looked out the window too, his face gloomy. Even their innocent souls could see how cruel things were. Olivia felt a surge of anger in her chest. The injustice she had been subjected to for years had peaked. She was destitute, but she had been patient for her children. She accepted her parents' assertions that the business was having difficulties and instilled perseverance in her kids. In actuality, however, her sister's family and her parents were taking a lavish vacation. "No, you are not excluded." In a hushed but determined voice, Olivia responded. "Instead, the truth must be known." Olivia pulled out her phone and surreptitiously snapped a picture of her sister's family and parents in first class. It was evident from the photo that they were eating opulent dinners and tilting champagne glasses, and she decided something. Olivia shared the picture with her parents, sisters, uncles, aunts, cousins, and the rest of her extended family on the family group chat. One message was contributed by her. "My parents informed me that due to the company's difficulties, we would not be able to take a family vacation this year. This is what I discovered on the aircraft, despite the hardships my kids and I had gone through. Have a great time in Hawaii with your family." The instant she hit the send button, Olivia felt her heart racing. In first class, she noticed a disturbance. Olivia's phone was vibrating as soon as the picture was uploaded to the family group chat. After a series of notification sounds, she put her phone on airplane mode. Prior to that, though, she saw that Uncle Jim and Martha, Cousin Sarah, and Jason, and other family members were sending her surprised and angry texts. Olivia looked out the window and put her smartphone back in her purse. Her heart was full with complicated feelings. In addition to despair and rage, there was an odd feeling of freedom. For the sake of peace and family, she had kept quiet for years. Now, however, the truth was known. Hiding was no longer necessary. "Are you all right, Mom?" Ethan inquired worriedly. Olivia gave her kid a grin. "I'm all right. Speaking the truth is sometimes necessary." Leah gave her mom's hand a squeeze. "Do Grandma and Grandpa feel irate?" "Most likely." Olivia gave an honest response. "However, it is their issue. For the remainder of the flight, we just spoke the truth." Olivia avoided eye contact with first class. She talked about their goals in Arizona and watched movies with her kids. She made an effort not to consider the repercussions of her behavior too much. In Arizona, what would happen when you got there? Olivia switched off the aircraft. As soon as her phone rang, she saw that she had more than 20 missed calls from her parents and a message from Melissa asking, "What are you thinking?" After taking a big breath, Olivia and her kids made their way to the terminal. They went to a hotel after renting a vehicle. The next day was the funeral. Leah said, "Let's swim in the hotel pool." "Yes," Olivia concurred, "but let's first have lunch and take a little break." Olivia checked her phone one more after checking into the motel. Her parents had sent her new texts. "Let's explain, Olivia. There's a miscommunication. Give us a call as soon as possible. It's a family issue." She chose not to respond to the messages and took her kids to a neighboring cafe for a late lunch. A call came in from her cousin Diana. "Olivia, everyone is discussing the picture." Diana's voice was a mixture of wrath and pity. "Uncle Harold and Aunt Catherine's actions are unbelievable," Olivia said softly. "I couldn't believe it either. However, this is not the first instance. My parents have supported Melissa's family for years, but they claim the business is having trouble while on a first-class Hawaii vacation." Diana was furious. "Doesn't that resemble fraud?" Olivia gave a shrug. "They have a choice. All I want to do is instill honesty and integrity in my kids." Olivia hung up and looked across the table at her kids, who were waiting. She found courage in their innocent faces. She had made the correct decision. Instead of ignoring injustice, she wanted to set an example for her kids by standing up for what they are worth. The following day, at the funeral, one by one, relatives came to Olivia. Many people offered their support and sympathies. That picture was shocking, Harold and Catherine said, a distant aunt. When did they start acting so self-centeredly? Olivia replied. I didn't know either. The company has been struggling for years, but she didn't follow through on her statements. She had no intention of totally demonizing her parents. She, too, had been freed by the revelation of the truth. Olivia gave Ethan and Leah the chance to learn more about the late Aunt Eleanor during the funeral. She explained that she tried to show the kids the positive aspects of family and that she was a very kind and caring person. Michael, Olivia's ex-husband and another member of the family group, called her the night after she got back from the funeral. Talk. I saw that picture. Michael spoke in a serious tone. Their conduct is appalling. Are the children doing well? They're hurt somehow. Olivia gave a direct response. Michael's voice was unusually passionate, Olivia. Listen, in fact, I used my legal expertise to investigate your parents' business. From the public information available, there are no signs of financial difficulty. In fact, revenue has increased by 30% over the past 3 years. Olivia gasped. Really? Yes, Michael continued. Not only that, I found out that Melissa's husband, Brad, has recently purchased a luxury car and built a new vacation home. This might be more than a simple favoritism. Olivia stood by the window, looking up at the night sky. What do you mean? I don't know for sure, but there might be some financial manipulation going on, Michael said cautiously. It might not just be a matter of family favorites, but possibly misappropriation of company funds. Olivia fell silent. She had only wanted to expose her family's hypocrisy, but the situation was becoming more complex. We might need to investigate, Michael suggested. You and the children have legitimate rights. I'll think about it, Olivia replied. After hanging up, she sat on the sofa, holding her head. What had been a simple family issue seemed to be developing into something bigger. The following week, Olivia's uncle George, Harold's brother, a retired accountant, contacted her after seeing the photo. I asked a friend to check the financial status of Robinson Properties, George said in a quiet but stern tone. Several suspicious points were found. Large sums of money have been flowing out as consulting fees to external parties, and the recipient appears to be a shell company owned by Brad. Olivia's hands trembled. Isn't that illegal? Most likely, George agreed. It seems Harold and Catherine have been channeling company funds to Melissa and Brad, essentially feeding off the family company. The claim that the company is struggling was merely an excuse to reduce support for you. The truth was becoming clear. Olivia was unsure how to handle this information. She didn't want to legally pursue her parents. She had only sought fair treatment for herself and her children. However, events had started moving beyond her control. The photo posted to the family group chat had spread beyond the family through acquaintances. It had circulated in the local real estate industry, rapidly eroding the credibility of her parents' company, which had falsely claimed to be struggling. Inquiries flooded in from investors and business partners and shareholders, viewing the situation seriously demanded an emergency shareholders meeting. Olivia was also summoned to the meeting as a family member entering the conference room. Olivia felt her stomach tighten with tension. Her parents and sister sat at the front of the room, their faces showing a mix of fatigue and fear. As the meeting began, Harold and Catherine attempted to defend themselves. It's a misunderstanding. The company's funds are being managed properly, Harold insisted, but their defense crumbled in the face of evidence presented by George and other accounting experts. The illicit fund diversion by Melissa and Brad was revealed with detailed investigation results to save the company. A complete overhaul of management is necessary, declared the shareholders' representative, and surprisingly, the relatives requested Olivia to assume the position of interim CEO. Me? Olivia asked in disbelief. But I have no experience. Your administrative experience at a biotech company, and above all, your honesty is what this company needs now, Uncle George explained. A fresh perspective on the real estate industry is also important. The conference room fell silent. Her parents and sister sat with surprised faces. Olivia pondered deeply. This wasn't only retribution, but an opportunity to properly drive the organization in the correct path. It was also a chance to demonstrate her children the significance of honesty and accountability. "I accept," she eventually responded, "but I have conditions. My objective is to salvage the firm and safeguard the interests of all shareholders and employees. I do not seek to act out of personal grudges." A sigh of relief emerged from the meeting room. Olivia gazed at her parents across the table. Their eyes indicated remorse. She spoke strongly but without anger. "It's time for all of us to do the right thing." 3 months had passed since Olivia became temporary CEO. Her regular routine had radically transformed during the day. She was busy operating the firm. She loved spending time with her kids in the evenings, and she studied management-related books and resources at night. The environment inside the Robinson Properties office has changed. Employees were slowly reacting to Olivia's genuine leadership after she implemented a management philosophy that placed a strong emphasis on openness and justice. "How does the upcoming quarter look?" During the monthly staff meeting, Olivia questioned the finance manager. "Better than anticipated." The financial manager, Jennifer, reported, "with the acceptance of ambiguous accounting practices. Additionally, investor confidence is starting to rebound." Olivia gave a satisfied nod. She was still dealing with a serious problem, though, as she arranged the business's finances. There had been yet another startling revelation. Her parents should have given Olivia the money in secret accounts that they had been hiding for years. According to her ex-husband, Michael, this is plant fraud, not simply preference. He was serving as a legal counselor for the business. "Olivia, you are free to take this matter to court." Gazing out the window of the workplace, Olivia pondered, "Do I need to file a lawsuit?" "That's up to you," Michael said thoughtfully, "but please keep the kids in mind. For them, this concerns their connection with their grandparents as much as the law." Olivia gave a nod. She chose to put the company's reconstruction and the family's reconciliation ahead of legal action. Olivia, Ethan, and Leah were preparing pancakes one Saturday morning. Ethan posed an inquiry. "How's the business doing, Mom?" Olivia smiled in response. "Everything is going smoothly." "Get better gradually. You've become more self-assured, Mom." Ethan took a keen look. It was accurate, but Olivia was taken aback. She had started to have greater faith in herself. She had learned about her own strengths after being put in a position of responsibility. "But is it possible that we won't see Grandpa and Grandma again?" Leah inquired anxiously. Olivia hesitated for a while at her query. She continued to have a complex connection with her parents. They were no longer involved with the firm as much and had been kicked out of management. They made a mistake. Olivia gave an honest response, "But it will take time for us to get back together." About 6 months after Olivia's checkup, Melissa unexpectedly showed up at work one day. She appeared exhausted and had lost her once arrogant demeanor. "I'd like to speak," she said. Olivia informed her secretary. "I welcomed Melissa inside her office and will be out of commission for around half an hour." "What is it?" Olivia asked coolly. Melissa put her hands over her face as she sat on a chair. "Everything is disintegrating." She let out a strangled sound. "Brad has wasted all of the stolen money on speculating and gambling. Now we're about to go bankrupt," she added. "Our home payments are past due, and we are unable to even cover the children's tuition. Every night, Brad drowns himself in drink. I need your assistance," Melissa begged, her eyes welling. Olivia looked across the desk at her sister. Previously the target of her jealousy and envy, the sister was now attempting to win her sympathy. Olivia thought. "Life is ironic, Melissa," Olivia said in a composed tone. "I won't base my decisions as the CEO of the firm on my emotions. I'll think about what assistance the business can offer within its limits. If you and Brad agree to restore all of the money that was stolen from it and take legal responsibility." Surprised, Melissa glanced up. "We are unable to make amends. The funds have been expended. To pay it back, are you prepared to liquidate assets?" Olivia asked sharply. Melissa glanced down in silence. "Melissa, I want you to understand," Olivia went on. "This is a legal problem as well as a familial matter. Despite my personal desire to assist, I have an obligation to the stockholders. Although I am your sister, I am not allowed to utilize business property at will." Melissa let out a cry. "Yes," Olivia said softly, "you are my sister. I want you to act morally because of this." Our parents instilled in us the values of integrity and accountability when we were young. However, it appears that such lessons were lost as adults. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. First, what should I do? Legally reveal all of Olivia's remarks. Then, to the greatest degree feasible, create a payback schedule. I'll then think about what assistance the business can offer. Melissa looked back before she left the office. "Olivia, you've changed?" "No." Olivia grinned. "I've been constant. I suddenly realized how valuable I am." Olivia had miraculously restored Robinson Properties a year later. The market held her idea of honesty and openness in high respect. The middle-class affordable home construction project was a huge success and improved the company's standing. Intimate time with Olivia and the kids had returned, and she had also mended her relationship with her ex-husband, Michael, who served as the company's legal counsel. Even so, they hadn't been married again. After they had become closer and more respectful of one another, summer break arrived. Olivia organized a trip to a posh resort owned by the business for Ethan, Leah, and herself. This was a real business strategy conference that included a family vacation, not a reward. The decision was made publicly and was accepted. She posted to the group chat the day before she left. "I'm going to a strategy retreat with the families and management team of Robinson Properties tomorrow. We'll be joined by the kids. I hope everyone has an amazing summer break." Olivia, her kids, and Michael were all grinning in the accompanying picture. They were beaming with pride and happiness. After 3 years, Robinson Properties had become the leading real estate firm in the area. Olivia had remarried Michael and been officially made CEO. The two had reestablished their connection after realizing one another's abilities. Harold and Catherine, her ex-parents, had been given suspended terms of 2 years and a year, respectively, for tax evasion and embezzlement of business money. They lost the majority of their possessions after confessing to their guilt in court. These days, they had a humble existence in a suburban apartment. Our grandparents are no longer upset. One day, Leah questioned her mother. She had developed into a sensitive little lady by the time she was 12. With a gentle stroke of her daughter's hair, Olivia said, "I don't think they're angry. Instead, they feel guilty about what they did." Olivia permitted weekly dinner meetings with her parents, allowing them to remain somewhat involved, but they were usually in public settings with kids around. Through painstaking efforts, Harold and Catherine were attempting to mend their ties with their grandkids. Their authoritative demeanor had vanished, and they now acted with humility. "Humans are prone to making blunders," Olivia instructed her kids. Learning from such errors and having the determination to make the necessary changes are what matter. After their divorce, Melissa and Brad had moved back in with their kids to live with their parents, losing her job at the organization. She worked as a cashier at a nearby grocery and was attempting to start again. Brad often missed child support payments after moving out of state. "How is Aunt Melissa doing?" Ethan inquired. "One day." By the age of 15, he had developed into a perceptive young man, Olivia said. "She's learning right now. It takes time to rebuild a life." Olivia once spoke at a charity function held by the firm. Numerous locals, business associates, and family members assembled at the location. "Unexpected turning points can occur in life," she said gently. "I was just a mother hoping to provide her kids with a pleasant summer vacation 3 years ago. Our business is expanding now under the tenets of honesty and openness. The most crucial thing is to stay truthful, regardless of the challenges you encounter, and to instill moral principles in the future generation. Integrity, not riches or prestige, is the real legacy that our children learn from our behavior." The crowd also included Harold and Catherine. As they listened to their daughter's speech, they quietly started crying. They had lost their family's trust in addition to their wealth and prestige. And in their old age, they had discovered that it was far more difficult to win back that trust than to lose it. Melissa, who had lost her cockiness, was likewise standing in a corner of the arena. She looked exhausted as she saw her sister's accomplishment. At least she had started teaching her kids the value of leading an honest life, Even if she was still on a lengthy path of atonement, the family's destiny was altered by a single picture. Olivia occasionally reflects about her choice. That day, although it was a difficult decision, she is certain that it was the best one for her, her kids, and, ironically, her parents. Sometimes the truth is painful, but it's a necessary pain for growth, Olivia reflected. Her life was altered by the image she witnessed through the aircraft window. However, the scene beyond her window now represents a brave and honest new horizon.